Alright, fellas, it's me, Quindarius Dean. I'm here to teach frezon. You can do this on pretty much any map. Maybe Pact in earlier versions might have been an exception. But first thing about frezon is you gotta set up distro. So let's do that first. We'll get some steel. We're gonna throw down some ghosts. Not actual ghosts. And we're gonna put down some stuff to plan for the future. You don't have to plan for the future this hard if you've not really set up frezon before. I've got a good idea on how I want things to look, so that's why I've got it set up the way it is. But yeah, see, I already have a different plan for this. Just set up a couple pipes. If you want to be specific, you need 2 different offshoots for your oxygen and 1 offshoot for your nitrogen for later when you're setting up distro. But it doesn't really matter. So distro, we'll get that set up, put it all together. Always remember to max out your pumps. Stuff stored in pipes is nice. And always check here. Nitrogen is on this end, so we're gonna do 79. Ooh, 79. And we're gonna max that out. And we've got distro. So now we get to do the fun part. First, there's a couple things you need about frezon. You'll see I have these pipes here. We'll talk about them in a second. The first thing about frezon is it's derived from tritium, so you need a burn chamber, and you need to set that up. If you haven't set it up, set any burn chamber up before, it's fine. I'm gonna go over that too. If not, I'll find a spot for you to skip ahead to. So, I'm gonna set up burn. So first thing you need to know about burn chambers is there's usually a space like this that is enclosed, usually has a spaced area to get to it. That's burn chamber, and for our purposes we'll be making tritium in it, so we need a plasma oxygen mix. When plasma and oxygen at the right ratios burns really, really hot, it makes tritium, and that's what we're going to collect from the burn chamber. So we're going to run a line from our oxygen here towards plasma. This is plasma. We can see that by checking the pipe. That's plasma, all right. So we're going to put a mixer down, and we'll then run this pipe all the way to the burn chamber. As far as numbers go, we'll get to that in a second. Let's just get the line laid out first. And here we are. That's the burn chamber line. So let's set up the burn chamber real quick. We'll go over ratios and everything else. For now, we've got to set that chamber up a little bit better. So first things first, you got to go out there and reconfigure it. Pretty much every burn chamber sucks by default, and it's up to us to make it suck less. So first things first, you want to fit as many scrubbers on the floor as you can. Air injector is fine. In fact, it's preferred. I like air injectors here. So let's get rid of this. I'm just going to fit 3 scrubbers on the floor here. You can't do pipe stacking anymore. Lost dream. It's dead. So here we are. We got... why did I put a T there? Let's get rid of that. We need that to connect to the output. So this is the output of our burn chamber. We got an input. That's where our mix is going to come in. It gets injected at the air injector, and then we're going to scrub it out and pull it out through a pipe down here. So we need a 4-way here because we're going to put scrubbers down. And here we are. I need more steel. I'm going to cheat. Well, no, I'm not going to cheat. Cheating's bad. We're actually showing a scenario, so I forgot steel. Pretty much any map, maybe with the slight exception of... Oh, is it box or meta that makes it really resource tight? But everything else, you'll have the resources to build the frezon loop pretty much around start. So, okay, there's our frezon, well, tritium collection here. So when you set up a burn chamber, you configure it to have as many scrubbers on the floor as possible, and then you're going to link them all with your multi-tool. Simply grab the multi-tool and click on all the devices. Once that's done, we're going to go and set it up at an air alarm. This air alarm's over here is empty. It's provided for us to link to. But before I do, there's one more thing I want to modify about this. Oftentimes you'll get a space tile between the burn chamber and the Atmos room. We want to make our loop cold. Frezon only happens at cold temperatures, so we're going to remove this pipe and replace it with a radiator. Having a radiator lets us vent that heat from the hot tritium fire to space before we pull it into our system. So once we do that, we'll reclaim this pipe for metal. We're going to head back inside, and we will talk about the actual setting up the frezon loop. The last thing we want to do is get our scrubbers set up. So we're going to set this. We have 3 scrubbers on that list. It shows up here. So first things first, this might be a hotly contested topic, but I like wide net on this. So we're going to set up the air alarm. We're going to go to the scrubbers tab. We're going to turn off auto mode. Auto mode will automatically set it to safe collection settings when the scrubbers are hit. And that's bad because we're going to be putting plasma into this bad boy, and that's an unsafe gas for people. So auto mode would reset our scrubber settings and kind of ruin the whole thing. So turn off auto mode, and then we're going to go open up this gas filter settings on any of the scrubbers here. We're going to turn off everything that's not tritium, because we're only wanting tritium out of this. We have a side product of water vapor, but we're going to vent that stuff out to space. So we're going to copy that to similar devices, and all of our filtering for scrubbers is just set to tritium on wide net. This checkbox is also something I prefer. It scrubs in a slightly wider radius around each scrubber, so you get more tritium out of that. Once that's done, we're kind of done setting up the burn chamber. One last thing I'd like to do is replace this valve with volumetric pump. People sometimes ask, especially if they're new to Atmos, well, what's the difference between a regular pump and a volumetric pump? And the answer is nobody knows, and it sucks. People do know. I just don't care to explain it right now. This volumetric pump there. We're going to lay down the frezon loop next. So I'll go over the ratios. Actually, you know what? Let me think about this. Yeah, we'll go over the ratios at the end. We'll talk about how all the pipes are working towards the end. So we've set up burn chamber. This involves running an oxygen and plasma line into this spaced area, setting up scrubbers that pull the product out back to the Atmos room, and then we've set up the air alarm. Now we're going to set up the frezon loop. So what this entails is taking the tritium here and mixing it with oxygen and nitrogen at negative 200 degrees Celsius. Once you have tritium, nitrogen, and oxygen present at minus 200 Celsius, we get frezon. And when we get frezon, a whole bunch of stuff happens, but most importantly, frezon interacts with the nitrogen to make nitrous oxide, and that's going to be a waste gas. So let's start by pulling from the tritium we're getting out of the burn chamber. We're going to make some pipes to pull it towards this, because we need some space. We're going to filter out some waste gases. So I'm going to pull it over this direction, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple T-junctions here. If we want to get the loop to minus 200 Celsius, we need freezers involved. And so we can use these, and I'll just shift them over here. Now, an important note, if you have never done this before, a heater can be a freezer, and a freezer can be a heater. It's as simple as opening up the panel with your screwdriver, using the crowbar to deconstruct it, using it again to pull out the parts, and then you find the thermo machine board here. We're going to change that with the screwdriver, and that changes the heater to a freezer. You put all the parts back in, and it's as good to go as it gets. So that became a freezer, and we're going to pull these over to the side. We've got the power net event, which is really annoying. I don't know enough about localhost servering to turn events off, so I'll just turn that back on. The APC, because we're going to be in the dark here. Alright. So we've got our freezers. That's going to make it minus 200 Celsius. And now we're going to have waste gases involved. So a few things happen when we get frezon. Like I mentioned, tritium being present alongside oxygen and nitrogen makes frezon. When this happens, some oxygen is consumed with the tritium to make frezon, and nitrogen becomes a byproduct of this. But we also need that nitrogen to not clog up the loop, so we have to vent some of that out to space. And just when we get the frezon, that frezon also interacts with some of that nitrogen to make nitrous oxide, which we're not really wanting for our loop, so we're going to off-gas that too. So first things first, we're going to create a little filtering loop. And I'm going to put down a few filters here. And create 3 in a line. Sometimes I do it 2 over here and 1 over here, but 3 in a line is fine by me. We'll talk about what exactly these filters are doing here in a second. I'm going to lay out the loop so that you can see it, and then we can talk about what's going on. Alright, this loop is mostly laid out. I'm going to build it. It's not all the way built out. We've got to do some venting to space, so we're going to have to build some of this blueprint. And we're going to talk about it. So we talked about how we have nitrogen and nitrous oxide as waste products of this interaction. So we have to vent some of that into space. Or some people like collecting the nitrous oxide. You could do that too. You could just set a filter and connector port and fill up a nitrous oxide canister. For me, I don't care that much. Frezon is highly valuable on its own, so I ignore doing that. And if you've not really done an off-gassing into space of a waste gas in the middle of an Atmos room, it's pretty simple. You set up a pass event somewhere, and once you... Yeah, I do have more steel. Once you have that pass event down, we're going to use the RCD and the holofan projector. So we're going to holofan projector the tiles we want to space, and then we're going to use the RCD on deconstruct mode to deconstruct a tile. We're going to deconstruct under the holofan. This makes sure that the rest of the Atmos room doesn't get spaced and we don't lose Tropico. And once that happens, we have a spaced tile. And we're just going to surround it with glass. I do plain old directional windows because I don't expect anyone to be in here other than me. So you can just do them in a box like this, all enclosed on the same tile. Some people prefer to space them out on the edges of the nearby tiles. I just think this is nice and clean, so I do it all on the same tile. I'm going to do the same over here. Now we've got 2 spaced tiles. That's for off-gassing. And that is pretty much the frezon loop. I got to set up a mixer here. This is going to be nitrogen and oxygen. Remember how I said that frezon needs nitrogen and oxygen at minus 200 Celsius? Well, this is that nitrogen and oxygen we're going to bring in. So at this point, the frezon loop is complete. This will, once we've configured it, make frezon. So let's go over how this works. First off, let's talk about the burn chamber. Again, if you've set up a burn chamber before, this is going to be familiar to you. If you've not, here's how we're going to do it. We have oxygen and plasma here. oxygen over here, plasma over here. And we're going to pump some plasma into the side of this. I'm just going to set at 1000 kPa. I'm sure we can go lower. But what we're going to do is we're going to set the side port to 3.6%. The side port is this port over here. That's not going straight through. And that's going to be our plasma. I like to do a 3.6% plasma mix. Some people do 98% oxygen, 2% plasma, 97, 3, whatever. This is what I'm using, 3.6% plasma, 96.4% oxygen. Once we do that, we're going to set the output pressure to 1000 kPa, and we're going to turn it on. That sends some oxygen and plasma mix up to this pump, which I have off for now. So the way we do a burn chamber ignite is we're going to close this, and what you can do is you can start injecting your plasma and oxygen into the chamber. So, couple things. If you don't see it filling up like this and getting nice and purple in here, then your scrubbers are incorrectly set, and you need to basically vent this loop coming out of the burn chamber and get rid of all that plasma, because plasma has a heat capacity that will just retain all of the heat from that reaction if it's left in the loop and screw up the frezon making. So now that we've got this full of this mix, we're going to go out into space and we're going to ignite it. So usually I like to leave a hollow fan outside the room before I open it. Sometimes, if you're a little slow about it or something goes wrong, that can choke out the reaction, because what we're going to be doing is we're not going to collect water vapor. So when we burn this, we get plasma and oxygen burning, and that creates tritium and water vapor. That water vapor is considered a waste gas to us. And since we're not collecting it, if we just leave it enclosed like this, it's going to build up. It's going to get hot, it's going to get dense, and it'll eventually choke out the whole room until it's nothing but hot water vapor. So we're going to leave this door open to space once this reaction gets going. But that's the key part, once it gets going. So I would place a hollow fan here, but I'm going to show we don't really need one if we just pop in here, close it, and we start burning. So once we start burning this, it'll get hot, and we're going to pop out of here. As long as we have the Atmos fire suit on, it doesn't really hurt us to be in that fire. And we're going to let this cook for a little while. We're going to go back into Atmos and look at the air load. We're looking for it to get in quite some ways into the thousands of kPa territory. And once it's at that, we can open this up. And what this does is it leaves this open for water vapor to escape. The rest of this is still going to burn nice and hot and make plenty of tritium. We can check this pump here and see there's plenty of tritium waiting for us to take it in. So that's our tritium part. We have tritium now, and now we need to talk about getting the rest of the loop up. So I'll repeat, frezon is made when tritium is in presence of oxygen and nitrogen at -200 Celsius. So here's our oxygen and nitrogen that we have a mixer for, and nitrogen is coming through the primary port. And so I'm going to set this at a 10% nitrogen, 90% oxygen mix, and I'm going to start it out at a low pressure of 200 kPa. The reason for that is it's a lot easier to make a small amount of gas cold than it is to make a lot of gas cold. And the thing about frezon is it makes things cold, so we only really need enough to get started. So I'm going to turn both of these freezers on. I set them to 0, which it bumps up to a minimum of 73.15 K. That's fine. These freezers will start cooling the loop down. Once it gets to -200 Celsius, we can turn on the tritium, and we can start moving gas through. Now, while we're doing that, we also have these two filters that are going out to space. One of them is going to be completely nitrous oxide. It's a waste gas to us, we don't want it. The other one is nitrogen. It is also somewhat of a waste gas, but we need some in the loop at all times. So we're going to outgas 15 liters per second to start, and I'm going to leave that off until we get frezon going, because if we off-gas the nitrogen too early, then it gets harder to get this temperature down. So we're at -200 Celsius now. We're almost ready. I'm going to configure this last filter. This will be where our frezon goes. We're going to set this to a low 200 for now. I'm going to keep it off because I want to use the frezon to cool the loop as we start setting it up. So we've got everything ready. We've got our tritium, ready to come in. We've got our oxygen and nitrogen mix coming in at 10% nitrogen and 90% oxygen. And then we've got our nitrous oxide filter. And this stuff we're going to set up in just a second. So let's get tritium introduced here. I'm going to set this low, 3 liters per second. I usually do this 3 liters per second, and I might step it up to 5 or 7 later on, but 3 is a good start. So we're going to do this, and now we're going to see that we have tritium, and frezon is starting to be made. Now, this is producing some nitrous oxide. We're getting a nitrogen buildup, and what we're going to do, look how cold this is. Minus 238 Celsius, and continues to go down. That's because frezon makes any gas that it is in contact with really cold. We can use this to our advantage. We can pump our oxygen-nitrogen mix up to 1000 kPa. That lets us introduce more for this to react with, and we get all that pressure in really fast, and it stays cold while it goes up. Now that we've done that, we have plenty to interact with, and now we're starting to see nitrogen's going to be building up. So we're going to turn on our nitrogen filter now that we have frezon going, and that off-gasses some of the nitrogen, and allowing us more space to make frezon. We've got a lot of frezon on the pipes, and so now we're going to turn on our frezon filter. This moves frezon out of the loop and into this section. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to configure this pump to, we're going to leave this as is. We're going to take a storage canister. We're going to place it down here. This storage canister is what's going to hold our frezon. Be sure to lock it so that clowns don't take your stuff. And at this point, we are collecting frezon. Now, this last little bit is to help pack the cans in tighter. We're going to set this at a very low transfer rate of 0.001. Then you're going to turn it on. Now, frezon is cold. It's at a temperature of 30, almost 31 Kelvin. But we can make this better. These storage canisters max out at about 9000 kPa. But if we introduce a little bit of nitrogen to this, we get nitrous oxide. Remember how I said frezon in contact with nitrogen makes nitrous oxide? Well, nitrous oxide helps keep things really cold due to its specific heat. So if I wrench this down here, we get 0.001 liters per second of nitrogen trickling into this can, and we start having nitrous oxide in this can. This, see how it's lowering the temperature? It used to be 31, 32 K, and now it's going lower. This will eventually bottom out around 25, 26 K. And at that point, we are making it cold enough to fit a lot more value in the can. Remember, when we make the gas colder, the pressure goes down too. So as cold as we get the can, that means we can pack more moles of frezon in for more value when we eventually have cargo sell it. So let's take a look at our loop. There's something a little wrong, something we can optimize here. We see that the temperature is somewhere around 227.8. We can make this better. Frezon more frezon is made at temperatures closer to minus 200 Celsius. So right now we're a little cold. But you see how we still have 17 moles of frezon in this particular part of the pipe? We can make this transfer rate go up to like 400 and see what that does to the temperature. You see the temperature is getting warmer. We're getting minus 225, 224. We want to try to stabilize this somewhere between minus 200 and minus 210 Celsius if we can. And all we really need to do to optimize that is just to keep increasing this frezon filter, because we keep removing the gas that's making it so cold at enough of a rate that the replacement gases are what's keeping this warm. So we're already at the minus 214 region, and we keep warming up. So we might be able to bump this up to 600, 650 liters per second. So I'll do 600 for now, and we'll see where that sits. Alright, we're at minus 208, and we're kind of in our happy spot. As close as you get to 200 Celsius without spilling over is pretty much the goal. If you spill over, you stop making frezon, and you kind of have to reconfigure or kind of stop the inputs into the system and just cool it down again. But we're resting easy around minus 203. We might go to minus 202, but I think we might be okay. Let's see. It'll eventually steady out, and we can figure out where we're going to go from here. Minus 202. Yeah, I think we're about good. I don't think this is going to go much lower. So let's take a look. Nitrogen keeps going down the loop. We need some nitrogen present, so we can reduce the amount of nitrogen that we're expelling to maybe minus 10 or a little bit lower. We want to try to make this number steady. That way we're allowing ourselves not to bleed out too much temperature, and we can squeeze a little more out of the loop. But at this point, we're essentially done with our task, right? We have a lot of frezon. And if we spawn in an appraisal tool, or what? Oh, that's right. That's not the menu. If we spawn in an appraisal tool, we can see that we already have 102,000 pesos worth of value in this can. And this is going to keep climbing until we reach the 9,000 kPa mark. And this can will probably come out to somewhere in the neighborhood of 126,000 pesos. And all you really need to do is pull more cans on and wrench them on. One big thing is you have a limited amount of plasma. We can check to see how much plasma is at the inlet of this pump. And right now we have about 4290 kPa of pressure. This will keep going down as we keep making more frezon. So eventually you'll want to order plasma canisters from Cargo and just refill this chamber. Put a volumetric pump here and a connector port here, and you can order more canisters from Cargo, and they will be happy to do so when they see you have made them exorbitantly wealthy. And you just put more plasma into this chamber by wrenching it on here. And once you're done with that, you can recycle it by using the plasma canister to hold more frezon. Just make sure they don't get confused and mix up what's for sale and what they're giving to you. So we've almost got the single can full already. And we'll appraise it at the end. We'll see what kind of value Cargo will get out of it. But it's pretty significant. Alright, we've stopped gaining more frezon. So this is 127,000 pesos worth of frezon. All I need to do, switch them out, wrench a new one on, and you're good. This is essentially self-sustaining. We can probably optimize a little more, increase our frezon output, tweak it a little bit, but we're pretty much done at this point. We are making lots of value for the station. This can is already worth 44,000 pesos, so not too bad once you get the hang of it. We'll go over a quick review, right? We've got this burn chamber. We got plasma and oxygen going at 1000 kPa into a burn chamber. We've set off the burn by using a welding torch. If we needed clarification, I ran through it with a welding torch. And we allowed it to get pressure, and now we're venting out the water vapor to space. The tritium is now coming into the loop, and that tritium is becoming frezon once it comes into this cold loop in the presence of oxygen and nitrogen. And then we're simply filtering off the waste gas nitrous oxide and some nitrogen. And then we're putting the frezon out to this side and collecting in this can while trickling in a very small amount of nitrogen to allow us to pack more in. Finally, of course, we needed that mixer here for the oxygen and nitrogen at 90% oxygen and 10% nitrogen. We started at 200 kPa so that we could get it cool really fast, and then we increased it up to 1000. Anyway, I hope this helped. Once you get familiar with this, you can set this up pretty quick, and you can get a lot of value for Cargo from it. Thanks for watching. As a quick side note that I've remembered, I want to talk about some common pitfalls that I had when I was learning how to make frezon, and to make sure you don't make the same mistake. We've got several filters here in a line, right? It's nice to acknowledge that you can line up filters like this, but please make sure that your loop is entirely homogeneous throughout. There is no point where we're having gas get stuck between filters. We got this T junction here and this T junction here, and beneath this vent is a pipe that keeps going. So this goes straight through, and we got T's throughout. there is no point in this system where we're forcing any air through anything. One of my earlier pitfalls was I lined all of these up tightly in a single row, and then I had the nitrogen filter last, and it was at this transfer rate. When you do that, you get a bottleneck, because this transfer rate isn't saying, oh, transfer 10 liters per second of nitrogen out of this filter. It means move all gas through this filter at 10 liters per second. So I ended up having a big freezon backup at my nitrogen filter. So make sure you have all of your pipes interconnected. You don't need a particular direction of flow. As long as it's homogeneous, it'll flow just fine. And then finally, of course, we've got this little offshoot frezon thing here to actually collect the gas. That one's pretty simple. You don't have to build it in the middle of filters like this. I've normally just had a pipe come around here and I collected it off to the side in a separate side loop. But as long as everything's homogeneous throughout the pipes, that's going to be a big one. Now, if you have some issues with the frezon, let's say it's not getting cold enough, one thing you want to do is turn off any inputs to the system. Turn this off, turn off your nitrogen filter out, turn off your frezon filter out. That lets you collect frezon to make it cold. Basically, turn off inputs to the system and just use the freezers to cool it back down. Particularly low pressure. Once you get it back to coldness, turn on your tritium and try to make frezon. Frezon on the pipes will keep it cold. And all you need to do to make it warm is increase the output of the frezon to the output pipes. If for some reason this stuff is getting really hot, check to make sure you haven't leaked plasma into the system by chance. You can do this pretty easily if you screw up configuring your filters or your scrubbers, which I still do sometimes. So improperly configured scrubbers and then trying to turn on the burn chambers can find plasma introduced. Filter out the plasma. It's pretty easy to do. Just use the nitrous oxide filter or something and just filter out the plasma. Make sure you set this to like 200 liters per second to really drain the plasma. Another common one is the burn chamber might turn completely into water vapor and you can't get a good burn going. Just make sure you open up the burn chamber and let all of the gases vent out. Once this pressure goes below around 4,000 to 6,000 kPa, you'll find that enough water vapor is vented that as long as you have the input still on, it'll auto reignite itself. Once it reignites, close the burn chamber for a little while, maybe 15 seconds or so to let the pressure build again, and then open it back up. That'll allow tritium to be made pretty effectively while still off-gassing your water vapor. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope this helped you.